Hello everyone. Wasn't planning on making a video today, but I was on my walk and I passed by a fellow that I pass once in a while. Not that often. He's walking his dog. He walks about the same distance I do, it looks like. I'm usually 6 or 7 kilometers a day, sort of first thing in the morning. Anyway, we were talking, and then we stopped and talked for a couple minutes. And then as we left, he said, "Stay safe." And I thought, really, in 2025? It's very interesting to me. Now, I don't know what he meant, right? Like that's a phrase that came about during the pandemic. And it's one that I recoiled against kind of instantly because to me, for one thing, I was pretty certain from the beginning that, most people didn't have anything to fear from COVID. Personally, that was my take. And I would submit to you that the majority of us are still here. And I would also submit to you that it's not because of some government interventions. And when people would say stay safe to me, I would usually respond with stay free, because the danger I saw, of course, was the government interventions and the curtailments of our freedoms. I would consider those to be the few freedoms that we have that I don't know if I would call them, inalienable rights or something like that, but I would just ask someone to make the argument for how it is that a person has the right to force their neighbor to stay inside their home, to not come out. And especially if they're not sick, they pose no threat to anybody. Where do you get that right? And if you don't have the right, where did the government get it? And, you would force people to make some kind of a terrible utilitarian argument, 2 wolves and a sheep, et cetera, et cetera. And so my response was always stay free, because I saw stay safe as very similar to some dystopian sci-fi nightmare movie where all of the citizens who are subject to all kinds of tyrannical oppression, this is a very common theme, right, in these future hellscape sort of dystopian nightmare technocratic society situations, scenarios. And they always have some colloquial saying, some phrase or something like that which is kind of indicative of that. And in some ways it's ubiquitous. They're kind of all unaware almost at some level. It's automatic. They just say this thing, whatever it is. I can't think of an example. I'm not a big movie buff and I haven't watched a lot of movies in a long time, but of course I remember this theme, right? It's pretty thematic. And this stay safe thing feels very similar to that to me. And I was curious to see if any of you concur with that. And especially now, like it felt that way to me, of course, during 2020 and 2021. But especially now, it's like a grouse just flying away there. I guess it's a pheasant. Yeah, it's a pheasant. Anyway, it was hiding in the bush to startle me. And I think, of course, first and foremost, no one's safe. I mean, that was my other retort too, right? No one's safe. Like, I'm not sure what that really means. No one gets out alive. No one's safe. I think it's silly to imagine that you can make yourself safe. Yes, certainly you can make yourself more safe, or you can, take measures to try to protect yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't disagree with any of that, of course. But this idea of stay safe just sort of, in a way, it felt very, even though we would be talking in some ways, like if I would talk about staying safe myself, it's a very empowering thing. Like I'm researching different health things and different, other things to try to, protect myself as much as I can. But that phrase felt very pedestrian to me. Like, what are you doing? What are you going to do? Are you going to just do what the government told you? Is that what, helps you stay safe? I'm not sure. Whereas freedom is something that in theory, a person could enjoy individual liberty from birth until, from the cradle to the grave. And that grave could be 100 years from the cradle, something like that. In theory, that could happen. And history is, of course, rife with freedoms being taken away from people. And it's usually, of course, governments or other large groups of people that impose themselves on the individual. And we're at much greater risk of losing that. We were certainly at greater risk of losing our liberty than we were losing our lives during 2020. And most people didn't seem to appreciate that. I certainly did. And it just felt really jarring to hear a guy in 2025 say, stay safe. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.